Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar Weekly discussion topic video. This week I'm going to be talking all about the Dai Li and various topics that relate to them. Mainly Kyoshi, the Kyoshi Warriors a little bit, Longfang, and I'll bring in other stuff like Azula and how she relates to Longfang, what happens there, and go into Korra with Hu Ting and the Dai Li returning and stuff like that. I'm just going to cover basically everything that relates to the Dai Li. So, let's get into this by starting off with 1. What is the Dai Li? The Dai Li are obviously the elite police force of Ba Sing Se. That's the initial impression you get just by looking at them. But their actual title is that they exist to protect the cultural heritage of Ba Sing Se. So they were basically a cultural heritage police force. That's their aim, that's what they're established to do. And that's important to note with everything that I'm going to talk about in a minute, that they are not inherently the police force of kind of Ba Sing Se. They are, but they're mainly there to protect the culture of Ba Sing Se. Or at least that's the thing that was said about them at the beginning. So that's interesting in and of itself, and I'll talk about that as we go on. But let's get into their origins. How did the Dai Li come into being? They were not established by one of the Earth Kings. That's a very important note to make. Kyoshi was actually the one who founded the Dai Li. So this is an organization that is in or around, like 200 and something years old. We don't have exact times for like what age Kyoshi was when she established them, or like the Earth King's reigns and stuff like that. So we can only guess. Kyoshi lived to be 230 years old, so there's a large amount of time that the Dai Li could have and could not have existed for. I'm just going to assume she had to have been within the first 100 years of her life when this happened. But anyway, so Kyoshi, post dealing with Qin the Conqueror, so that's important to note, established them. Now, what led up to that, it relates to Qin the Conqueror as well. The thing with Qin that people perhaps don't realize is that he was very close to gaining control of nearly the entire Earth Kingdom. The reason he could do this while there was still the 46th Earth King in power was because a lot of the people were not happy with the rule of the 46th Earth King. And I'll get into that in a minute, but because of this chaos with the leadership of the Earth Kingdom, he obviously disagreed as well, and managed to very effectively take over control of a large portion of the Earth Kingdom, nearly all of it. And obviously this came to an end, as we all know, on the kind of peninsula Kyoshi Village, and the formation of Kyoshi Village into Kyoshi Island was what killed Qin. Kyoshi was, I suppose, in the end, if it came down to it, she would have been willing to take him out herself, but inadvertently she ended up doing that anyway, and that ended the whole thing with Qin. But very shortly after that incident, she was called to Ba Sing Se by the 46th Earth King. For reference, King Kuei is the 52nd Earth King, so there's a few in between, and then I think Hu Ting is like the 53rd, and that would make Wu technically the 54th Earth King, which would technically be the last one, but he may not have a coronation. Oh, he actually was coronated, actually, so yeah, Wu is the 54th, and we assume last by the time of Korra, Earth King. But anyway, Kyoshi was called to Ba Sing Se by this Earth King, and what was happening in Ba Sing Se at the time was that after Qin was obviously defeated and stuff like that, there was a huge peasant uprising in Ba Sing Se. The people from the lower rings of the city were very angry at the way that this Earth King was treating them. He had more of his own interests at heart than theirs. He was ruling just by himself alone. That was the problem. Very understandable. He called Kyoshi in to deal with this uprising, this kind of rioting and stuff like that. Because from his perspective, what was happening was that the riots and stuff like that these people were causing were destroying the history of Ba Sing Se, and the history of the Earth Kingdom and stuff like that. So she came in, and he was basically asking her to stop this uprising at any cost, effectively saying, kill them if you have to, just, you know, keep the artifact safe and stuff like that. So, you know, when she eventually arrives, a lot of stuff has already been destroyed, a lot of history has already been lost. But what she does is she disagrees with the Earth King. He orders them to attack her, his guards to attack her. She obviously fends them off and basically says, no, I'm not doing what you want to do, and this is what I'm doing. So what she does is she establishes and trains the first group of Dai Li agents. I assume she comes up with the name Dai Li or something like that. And she tasks them with the goal of protecting the cultural heritage of Ba Sing Se. Basically being this organization that is meant to not directly serve the Earth King. They don't answer 100% directly to the Earth King. They are meant to be the kind of bridge between the king and the people, protecting kind of both. So they're both meant to protect the cultural heritage of Ba Sing Se in the sense of the artifacts that represent the king's rule and stuff like that, but also the people who are the people that the king rules. So that was her kind of goal when she established them, to be this kind of police force to stop rioting from happening, but also understand why rioting happens and kind of enforce kind of change and stuff like that. So that was the goal with the establishment of the Dai Li. And ultimately, obviously, the Dai Li become corrupt and stuff like that, but at the time they seemed to be quite effective in that the 46th Earth King does somewhat back down. He decides to give the people a voice in how he rules, the decisions that he makes, and of course the Dai Li help protect the cultural heritage and stuff like that. So, you know, over time we assume like positions like Grand Secretariat and the head of the Dai Li are established, and so what happens is that like the Dai Li, of course, as I said, and this is an important point to make given what I'm going to talk about with Korra later on, the Dai Li do not answer directly to the Earth King. That was the whole point of their establishment by Kyoshi, that it was this police force that didn't directly work for the Earth King. They worked for Ba Sing Se to protect the city rather than the ruler, not just the people, but, you know, protect both in a way. So, you know, good aims, but ultimately it becomes corrupt, and Kyoshi basically establishes that this is one of the biggest regrets of her time as the Avatar, that she even was the one who founded them, the one who created the Dai Li. It's her biggest regret as the Avatar, effectively, given what happens to them. But the whole time I think she forgets that she was also the founder of a much more positive group of warriors, the Kyoshi Warriors. And this obviously comes from a much more personal background, how they were established. But they're a group of obviously warriors who are very important in terms of on the good side of things. They're very much the exact opposite of the Dai Li. It's a group of non-benders, primarily women, whereas the Dai Li is primarily men. I can't really remember off the top of my head if there are women in the Dai Li. We might have seen one or two, but again, primarily men. And then, of course, the Kyoshi Warriors are only women, but like they dress Sokka up as a Kyoshi Warrior as well, so they're not 100% against men being part of it. But again, how the Kyoshi Warriors were founded, for anyone who's interested, is that on Kyoshi Village, Kyoshi Island, the women were always kind of getting harassed by men. You know, there's like they were on the peninsula, so people would come in, like fishing and stuff like that, trading and stuff like that. So the women would constantly get harassed, and Kyoshi decided to train the women in secret in self-defense, so they could protect themselves from men if anything happened. And eventually, like, this became so important and important for the women that it eventually grew into like a proper organization of warriors, the Kyoshi Warriors. And the reason they all wear the makeup and dress so much like Kyoshi is because she obviously was the one who founded them, and they respect her so much for being this person to help empower women and stuff like that. So that's that group. And of course the Kyoshi Warriors go on to be very important during the war. Suki, the other warriors, help get Appa back and stuff like that. Suki's very important, and they obviously help Sokka as well become an important person as well in the war. So, much more positive on that side of things. But Kyoshi never seems to remember that. I'd like to have a moment where perhaps Aang talks to Kyoshi and mentions this, that yes, you helped found the Dai Li and they turned out bad, but what about the Kyoshi Warriors? They were very effective. Sorry about that. That's just interesting in and of itself. But yeah, that's just a brief sidebar on Kyoshi and the two groups she helped to found and stuff like that. But let's get back into the history of the Dai Li. So they've been founded by Kyoshi. We assume that for the most part, for the first couple of 100 years or so of their existence, they do their job pretty effectively. There's no real uprisings in Ba Sing Se, and the king is still the king. The line of kings continues to rule and stuff like that. But over time, it's a group that becomes more secretive, more elite, more involved in political affairs. They begin to gain more power rather than the Earth King having power, because again, the Earth King doesn't directly control them, so he doesn't have all the knowledge about how the organization is run. And eventually, you get to the point where Longfang, as part of the Dai Li, becomes the ruler, becomes the Grand Secretariat, and the war happens. He then begins to organize the Dai Li in such a way where it is against the law in Ba Sing Se for anyone to mention the war. And so he goes as far as to brainwash people to act as kind of servants to guide people around, make sure that no one gets in contact with the king. They always are brushed away. It's going to be 3 weeks before you can get this, 2 weeks before that, and so on. You're not allowed to post flyers without permission of what they contain. They're very much containing the information here. It shows how powerful Longfang was in terms of him being able to keep the war a secret for so long, to the point where Quay had no idea. A lot of the people, especially in the inner rings, had no idea. And it was really only the immigrants, refugees coming in that knew about the war, and then we assume some people in the outer rings who would never get into the inner rings to tell anyone important. But if there ever was someone threatening to ruin this facade, conspiracy, they would be brainwashed in the secret tunnels under Lake Laogai, the secret Dai Li base. So it's really interesting to think about that. But at the same time, from Longfeng's perspective, him doing that is actually fulfilling the aim of the Dai Li, to protect the cultural heritage of Ba Sing Se. Nothing ruins a history of places more than war. The amount of destruction that happens because of war. Nothing results in the loss of more people, the history, culture, than war happening, because people have to go out and fight. They get killed. The place gets attacked. Monuments, artifacts get destroyed. So in his mind, he is doing his job as Grand Secretariat, as head of the Dai Li, and protecting the city from the war. But at the same time, there's that question, is it right to keep it a secret from the people who perhaps can't do anything to stop the war, or should everyone know? And stuff like that. So it's an interesting dynamic. Ultimately, the problem is the brainwashing. That's the really big problem. To some extent, I think you can sort of respect the want to keep it as a very important city in terms of keeping the Earth Kingdom in the war, keeping the Fire Nation from complete control. It's important that Ba Sing Se doesn't fall. But it's the brainwashing that's the real problem, the real villainous act that is kind of unforgivable, altering people's minds, brainwashing them to do specific things, to not think in certain ways. That's the major problem. And I would really like to know, actually, who in the Dai Li founded that technique of the light spinning around, brainwashing people, the method of questioning and how they do that. I'd really like to know where that came from. maybe Longfang was the one who invented it and stuff like that. But yeah, still very, very interesting that he managed to do this for so long. And again, going briefly into Longfang here, this is a guy who comes from the middle ring of Ba Sing Se. So he's not the lowest, but he's not the highest. He's not going to get into the higher rings of the city. They established he was the son of a merchant, and he went from humble beginnings to eventually somehow becoming the most, powerful man of the city. Grand Secretariat, head of Dai Li, to the point where he is doing some of the most impressive things we've seen anyone do in Avatar, in terms of, it's an incredibly powerful move that he's able to keep the war a secret from King Kui for so long. The amount of organization that needs to be in place for that to happen, for nothing to leak through, for it to be so strong in terms of how he manages the amount of refugees coming in and stuff like that. That's very impressive leadership from Longfang, and he absolutely is one of the most intelligent villains that we've seen in Avatar. And really, it's only the Team Avatar coming into things and really meddling with the plans, understanding the conspiracy there, that really turns things against him. But he still is in power because, of course, the Dai Li are loyal to Longfang. They don't answer directly to the Earth King. He temporarily takes over in this situation because Longfang is the villain of the piece, but you can see that they are still loyal to Longfang, at least until Azula comes onto the scene. And this is an interesting point about the Dai Li themselves. It seems like none of the leaders really come out of just the rank and file Dai Li. They are just very powerful, members of the police force, very powerful earthbenders, but none of them seem to have that leadership quality. They seem to require a special leader to really guide them, in that they follow Longfang. Then Azula takes over and they follow her, because she's a powerful leader, strong, controlling. They're afraid of her to some extent. Then, obviously in Korra, Hu Ting is in control. She's the one who has direct control over the Dai Li in Korra. So there you can see that there's no real imperative of the agents themselves to do anything. They always just seem to follow someone else. And I think that's actually quite interesting, in that I'd like to see a little story with the Dai Li where, after Azula banishes them or something like that, where do they go? Who leads them? What is their goals? And maybe even after Korra, with the banishment, with the Earth King stepping down, people electing their own people now, as Wu says. What exactly are they doing? Does a leader rise up among the ranks, or what? Or are they always just going to be this organization that needs someone to control them? Because ultimately, you look back on the history, and all of the sides that they take, the people they choose to lead, are always on the wrong side of things. They follow Longfang, turns out to be a villain. They follow Azula. They end up being traitors to the whole Earth Kingdom, the whole war. They lose. Then in the whole Hu Ting thing, her conspiracy comes out with what she's doing with the kidnapped airbenders. They're on the wrong there as well. This is just an organization that, I suppose, just after the initial few years, they just completely fall away, and they're just making wrong decisions all over the place. To the point where, when Azula takes over, and especially when she banishes them at the end, you really do question how on earth the Dai Li could ever be brought back into things in Ba Sing Se. So when Korra rolls around and Hu Ting is in control of the Dai Li, you really, I was really questioning it. You can listen back to the podcast when we reviewed these episodes. We were always asking the question, we need an explanation for why the Dai Li are back in things. They are basically the biggest traitors to the entire Earth Kingdom ever. Ba Sing Se fell effectively because the Dai Li joined Azula. I don't think her plan could have succeeded without them. They turned the course of the battle, the power roles in the city, with them making that move to join Azula. That led to her being able to defeat, Iroh, Katara, Aang, and stuff like that. That's what made Ba Sing Se fall and gave the Fire Nation the advantage in the later stages of the war. So the Dai Li should be considered the biggest traders ever. Obviously we don't know what exactly happens between the end of ATLA and the start of Korra. In terms of like, are those Dai Li just considered traders, and then are new Dai Li trained, or what? What I'm going to assume is that Hu Ting reestablishes the Dai Li and trains new people, this time loyal to her. And again, this is important to note. As I said at the very start, I made it very clear, the Dai Li were initially established and purposefully not meant to be under the command of the Earth King. So when Hu Ting takes over and they are directly under her command, you can really see that is exactly what Kyoshi didn't want. Imagine the 46th Earth King just established the Dai Li himself. All the peasant riders would have been killed straight away just because of his power, and you get the sense that that's what Hu Ting was kind of gradually morphing into, a corrupt leader and stuff like that. What she was doing with the airbenders in terms of, again, kidnapping these people, like conscripting them into her own airbender army, and then having this terrible training away from all the people that they like underground, and like we saw what Kai had to go through with this training and stuff like that. So you get the sense that like she's using the Dai Li for basically the same reason everyone uses the Dai Li. That is just this very powerful group of earthbenders that can shift the tide of any battle effectively. And that it's just interesting again to look at that they always seem to side with the wrong people in this situation. And so by the end of Korra, when like Hu Ting is dead, Wu is Earth King for a little bit, but obviously Kuvira is taken over, so he never really gets to be king. I'd really like to know what the situation is with the Dai Li. Are they going to be disbanded or what going forward? Because I think after the whole Hu Ting incident, in addition to everything that happened before, they just feel like this cursed group in the Avatar world that they can never make the right decisions. But there's that. So I suppose it's obviously interesting to speculate about what they could do. There's nothing really to speculate on, in that we never really got to know any of the new Dai Li all that well and stuff like that, and it's probably not a story they consider incredibly important to tell. If the Korra comics even mention the Dai Li, I'll be very impressed. I suppose I'll talk a little bit about how powerful the skills of the Dai Li agents, what makes them so powerful and game-changing in a way. I suppose straight away, they're all like master earthbenders. You have to be an earthbender basically to be in the Dai Li. And what's unique about their style is that they seem to be just in general very powerful earthbenders, but then they have that kind of Dai Li style that's unique to them. The expert use of the rock glove techniques, that they always walk around just with their hand covered in rock, and then with their earthbending they can still use it as basically just a normal glove, but they can fire it like a hand, they can fire it like a fist to punch people from far away, they can fire it and then morph it into handcuffs or to just seal people's hands up. It's a very impressive technique that perfectly fits a police officer and stuff like that. Taking people down without really hurting them. But when they need to, obviously as we see with Longfang, he kills Jet with a very dangerous earthbending move. You can see that they can do damage when they need to, but when they don't, they can very easily apprehend people. Not to mention their kind of investigation, kind of spying skills. For Longfang to be able to keep the war a secret for so long, he has to have them all as like experts, as spies, masters of surveillance, to be able to see any sort of people conspiring to kind of go against his rule or anything like that. So their techniques have to be impressive, and we see that at various points. Like they can stick to the roofs of buildings with their earthbending powers. They can basically walk on the walls with their use of like kind of rock gloves on the feet and stuff like that. And they can be silent. You see them in alleyways at certain points and stuff like that. So very impressive overall organization with regards to their skills, both in terms of bending, fighting skills, agility, and then of course spy kind of surveillance type stuff as well. So there's that. I suppose I'll briefly go back to Longfang, just to cover the final few pieces of information here. Longfang, gets obviously outdone by Azula. They're both very similar characters ultimately in terms of how they control people, but the way Azula just outdoes Longfang is really impressive, because as I explained a couple of minutes ago, what Longfang does in Ba Sing Se is amazingly impressive. Again, like, very few people in the Avatar world could do what he did in Ba Sing Se, keeping the war a secret. So for Azula to just walk in and in seconds have the loyalty taken away from Longfang, she has the Dai Li supporting her after they've been loyal to him for so long, all they've accomplished together, and they just side with Azula. That just shows how amazing Azula is at manipulating people, for her to change things so much. And again, Longfang had basically kept Ba Sing Se safe for all that time during the war, and no one got through. But Azula comes in and instantly has it. So it's just really impressive that, like, they used this villain, they established him as very powerful. He kills Jet, something none of the villains have really done up to now, kills someone, and then Azula just takes him out effectively. And she just takes him out with her words. She doesn't need to defeat him in battle or anything like that. That is amazingly impressive on Azula's side of things. But again, let's return to, I suppose, the Dai Li themselves. Overall, summing this up, interesting organization, but you can see the kind of flaws in it, and that, like, Kyoshi formed them to basically give a voice to the people that wasn't directly linked to the Earth King. But over time, that still being the case, by the time of ATLA, Kuei isn't in charge of the Dai Li. He barely knows anything about them. Longfang's in charge. So it's an important role that you can see goes awry. And again, the idea that they're constantly on the wrong side of things, they never make the right decision. They're constantly being used by other more powerful people. I would have liked to have gotten a better sense of who the general agents of the Dai Li are, just because, like, I'd like them to almost present us the idea that, like, leadership is not really something that's involved all that much in the training of the Dai Li, so they do need someone like a Longfang, like an Azula, to control them effectively. But I think that's about all there is to go on. So, like, they're one of these things where, like, I'm talking about a group of people here. There's not a whole lot of specific people that are really worth talking about here. So it's really hard to just, like, characterize them beyond their skills and the various events in history that they do. But I'll just end it here by saying, like, it's really interesting how they connect them to Kyoshi, Chin, the 46th Earth King, and then they used them very effectively in ATLA, used them effectively in Korra, and to the point where, like, they are a little bit of a mystery at the end of Korra. We don't know where they are. But yeah, I'm going to end it there. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this video, your thoughts on the Dai Li, and definitely in the comments also let me know what you want next week's discussion topic video to be. I haven't had any other suggestions since, so if you put in a good suggestion that I want to do, it could be next week's video, so just be aware of that. So that's been a video. Thanks for watching, and bye.